so much. And yeah, DevX, or developer experience, is not platform engineering. For the non-developers, the exclamation mark and equal signs means not. In Bash, we do it differently. Yes, me and Ophelia is going to talk about why it's not the same, because we hear that a lot. That's just good platform engineering, and that's not the whole story. And we think it's really important to tell that story, because otherwise we won't fix the stuff, because it'll be out of our focus. So yes, we have an agenda, or red thread. I don't know if that translates. I have a leash here. Yeah. So first off, I'll just very briefly explain why we don't think developer experience is the same as platform engineering. Then we'll talk about what is developer experience then, if it's not good platform engineering. Then we'll talk about something called cognitive load, from cognitive load theory. Ophelia will talk about some typical deployment journeys that we have. Yeah. And then we'll go about what can you do tomorrow of these things that are not part of platform engineering, but actually also drives developer experience. And then how does cognitive load theory relates to team topologies? It'll be a very brief 101, and then we'll get to the point, or conclusion, or yes. Eventually, there should be a point. So, my name is Henrik Høegh, and the slide is not to illustrate that we only get a new computer in Velux when the old one breaks. This is my first computer, Commodore 64. I did not have these. I had tapes. Yeah. I found an online emulator, and I wrote a small program that printed out the information about me. It's not open source, so don't ask, please. It's not going to happen. But I am a manager for the platform engineering team in Velux. We make Windows. We did that way before Microsoft. Yeah. And as the picture of the computer might tell, I'm a senior manager. So it's an age thing, I guess. But yeah, I'm an organizer in Cloud Native Aarhus. I was helping out with the KCD last year in Aarhus. I met Ophelia at one of the meetups where I talked about Rook or something. I don't know. Yeah, and yeah, working with Velux, really awesome. That's me.
Yeah. So this is me, and this is my first time on such a big stage, so I'm a bit nervous. But my name is Ophelia, and I went into the field of software engineering because I wanted to be a superhero. And then I found out there was not big money in it, at least not in Denmark. So I ended up going and got the coolest job I could ever thought to have, and that's being a database administrator. Back then, I really thought the most sexiest title you could have is actually to be the super user. Yeah, and then I just changed job a couple of times, been all around IT, but never really wrote code myself. So when I was halfway through my Linux admin certification, which I was finally on my way to get, I got my first leadership position offer at interlevel in Danske Bank to set up a new development team to start up building the new flexible and lightweight core for Danske Bank. So now here I stand, 1.5 years later. I'm the modernization and engineering lead for a tribe of 180 people. And we own the core banking system of customer account in Danske Bank. And if you don't know Danske Bank, we are the biggest bank in Denmark and second biggest in Nordic. So that says a bit. Yeah. So that's me. And yeah. Henrik will talk about.
Yeah, I'll just try and set the scene of what we're going to talk for the rest of the talk. Everybody, it seems, on LinkedIn, and that's where people tell stuff, and where we correct people. seems to say that developer experience is platform engineering done right? So we need, it needs to be easy to be used and blah, 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 all that stuff. I agree with that to some degree, but it's just not the whole story in my mind. Because if we take this as platform engineering, then we can create what's in the scientific community is called a Venn diagram, I think. I don't know, I'm not a scientist. We can have developer experience or ducks. Crack, I don't know. But it's much more than that, but there's an overlap. And that overlap, the thing where it overlaps, that's actually what we would consider developer or platform user experience. And that's what people are talking about. POCs, I guess. And we're missing out on all this stuff on the left side of the diagram. I think if we tell the story that developer experience is good platform engineering. So please have this in mind during the talk. This is what we actually try to explain in this talk. Yeah.
And there are a couple of theory about developer experience out there. The one we have chosen to base our talk on is this one. We call it the tempo of developer experience. Here, developer experience consists of 3 pillars. The first one is called flow state. This is simply the state where your developer is just hyper-focused and performing, and they deliver value in fast speed. And this is usually what we call of being in the zone. The second pillar is called feedback loop. It is much more than just CI/CD, as people might think. It's actually about tying development and the work of development with actually generating value and the beneficiary people at the end, which is the end user or the stakeholders. And then the third pillar, which is the cognitive load, will also be the pillar that we deep dive a bit more into in this talk. Yes?
So in cognitive load theory, and we're no experts, so we might say stuff that's wrong, but then you can correct us on LinkedIn. You have a certain amount of working memory, and I guess different people have different amount of working memory. Some can remember or deal with a lot of stuff in their head. I cannot. But you have a certain amount. And the thing in cognitive load theory is that there are different kinds of loads on your mind, and they come in a certain sequence and take up space. So the first one is called extraneous load. And that's basically all the stuff that's in your way to do the stuff that you wanted to do, right? So a developer, the first thing on their mind is not how to do GitOps. Believe it or not, it's not. There's so many things. How do I release? Where's the documentation? How do I merge this? How do I do this? How do I find metrics on this system, or whatever it might be? You know, that's basically good platform engineering, right? The things we're trying to optimize. Once that has taken up space in your working memory, then you can work on what's called intrinsic load. This is basically your craftsmanship. So if you're a Java developer and old like me, you need to know how Java works, right? You need to know maybe what RMI is or Java beans. I haven't done Java for a while. But there's a lot of stuff you need to know to do your stuff, right? That's like a carpenter needs to know also about his or hers. And that will take up space as well. And only when you have those two, you can start to work on the domain load. And this is where we enter the domain and the core thing that you're trying to solve, you know, the problem. So it's like personas, the domain that you work in, if you're doing domain-driven design and stuff like that. And that's where you actually connect your craftsmanship with the domain that you need to solve a problem in. And the more space you have in your working memory, the more space you have for this kind of load. And the better the solution you create will be. So we need to ensure that we have as much space for this as possible. And I think Ophelia will tell a small story.
Yes. So now we'll look at a typical development journey where developer experience is taken for granted. And normally, in the real world, we usually have an end user who has a problem. And that problem going through depends on the organization, how it looks like. It goes through the stack and falls down to the PO, who then do some prioritization and give to either one or some of her developers and say, hey, we have a problem, go generate some value. And then our developer will take this problem and go on a very long and dangerous journey of generating value. So the first encounters he will encounter on his way is the troll of extra novice load. So the troll of extra novice load works in such a way that you cannot bypass it. You cannot go on and develop, and you cannot let your application live out there in reality if you do not slay it. It could entail such a thing of ensure security, and how do we release, how do we operate and scale in production. So our developer has to slay this troll, and in the way, he will lose some hit points. The second encounter on the way is called the dragon of intrinsic load. And the funny thing of dragon of intrinsic load is you don't actually have to slay it. But this is where you have to understand how do you write good code, how do you write clean code, how do you structure it so that it's actually maintainable and sustainable for the future. How do you test it? And how do you quality assure so that you actually get the desired outcome of it? But if you choose to bypass it, or maybe only spend some of your HP on it, it will come and bite your ass later. That's what we call technical debt. Does anybody have that?
No.
So in this case, because I work for a bank, we need to be responsible. So we slay the dragon, and then we move on and lose some, maybe a lot of HP, and then meet our last and final encounters on the road, which is the wizard of a germane load. This is where the real value generation actually comes. The wizard will tell you about the domain, which will tell you about the problem space and the context you actually need to solve the problem within. It will give you the sympathy and empathy with the user to actually get to design the right user experience for them, so the solution you deliver actually become usable for them in reality. And then at the end, we also have our business, that it actually gives you the ability to enable our business for the long term, because we do not want to build software that works just tomorrow, but also builds so we actually achieve our long-term ambition in 5 years. But because our developer has already spent all of, or most of their hit points on the first two encounters, when they come to this place, they do not have much HP left. So they choose to bypass the wizard as easy as possible and just solve the problem with best effort. And then they end up coming out on the last end, only deliver very little value compared to the effort we end up putting into it. But this does not have to be the reality. So how do we ensure that our developer actually spent less effort on the troll, less effort on the dragon, but more time with the wizard, where the real value generation comes from? And that's what we're going to talk about next.
Yes, so at Velux, the window company, we made a CLI called Bora, and you can talk to my team if you want to know more about it. So I want to demonstrate, if you don't have Bora and if you have Bora, the differences. So let's say you need to release a service. You're a developer and you made some really awesome code, and now you need to give it, to the developer or to the user. So it needs to go into production, hopefully. So you want to do a release, so you create a version somehow. Maybe there's guidelines on how to do that, maybe there's not. Then you need to update the Helm chart with a tag or something like that, and you probably need to publish that chart somewhere. You need to create a PR in the GitHub repository, and you need some approval maybe and stuff like that. And there's actually more to this in many cases, right? So it's a journey of different things that has nothing to do with development or the problem domain. So with Bora, instead, if you want to release, you create a release, and the easiest way is to just put a tag on it, as we say. And when you put a tag, Bora will create a release artifact for you for each environment. And once you've done that, you can just run Bora and say release this version to this environment, enter. You can also add auto-release to dev, so when you merge to main and you create a tag, it'll just push it to dev automatically. So this is where the troll gets reduced, right? So it's a small troll. It's like an internet troll, almost. You know? So they spend less time on this. It's much easier, and they can get feedback really quickly on what's running in the different environments, so we don't have configuration drift and all that stuff. We try to make it as easy as possible for them. This is what I would call PUX, Platform User Experience, because it has nothing to do with intrinsic load or domain load. It's extraneous load, which we deal with in the platform team. Yes? And Ophelia has an example.
Yes, and to be honest, when you work in bank and you want to do development, and you need to make sure whatever you develop, it'll actually be able to run for a very long time and run with very big scale and load, then it's not just straightforward. So when I started in Danske Bank 1.5 years ago, when you need to bootstrap a service, it's not just bootstrap a service. You need to start configure some environment. You need to manage your dependencies. Otherwise, vulnerability, it's gonna come and bite your ass on later. You need to be able to do domain-driven design, so you isolate your boundary context properly, so you can enable your different development team to be self-sustaining. And you need to do event-driven architecture so that we actually get real decoupling in between the systems. You need to think about how do you set up tests, how do you structure and write them, so that we actually do quality assurance instead of quality control. And at the end, you also need to ensure everything you have done has the scalability that's there, so that the biggest bank in Denmark can actually operate. Because if we do not operate, people will not get salary, people will not be able to buy groceries. The work basically just stops. So what we have chosen to do is to see this entire process of bootstrapping a new service and consider the intrinsic craftsmanship for the developers as a complicated subsystem. So we wrap it around with a codified, opinionated development framework called Bedrock. And with Bedrock, when you need to bootstrap a service, you basically just call rock create, my service, and give a template. And for our case, it's Java. And this is what we call development user experience. So we simplify the complexity of bootstrapping service and consider the craftsmanship that's needed and all the compliance regulation requirements, pack it away in the development framework. In this way, we gave our development teams a shell for the dragging so that we can easier bypass it. And with these two examples, when we have a look again at this typical development journey, we have Bora work with platform user experience, give us the sunblade to slay the troll easily, lose very few points of HP. We reduce the extra nervous load. And then with Bedrock, we simplify the intrinsic load so they can easily bypass the dragon. And in this case, when the developer comes out at the end, he will be able to spend his time with the wizard, where we really generate some value for both our business and user. And then the value at the end will also become much bigger and cheaper to achieve. So if we don't have Bedrock, we don't have Bora, what can I do tomorrow? Also, if I'm just a small startup. So our recommendation is that you should start small and start cheap. Start doing programming together, pair programming, mob programming, do knowledge sharing events, strive for clean code, do hackathon, minimize choices and reduce meaningless processes, my favorite one, build a trusting environment, encourage system thinking in your teams, reduce number of parallel projects. So what you need to notice now is all of these examples we come up with now has nothing to do with platform engineering, but they do all reduce the cognitive load so that we can spend more time on development. But if you are a big enterprise with complicated systems and needs, then of course it will be a good idea for you to actually do the investment in creating enabling teams. It could either be platform engineering teams, it could also be complicated subsystem teams, so that your domain developers can focus on domain problems. So in 2019, there was a very famous book came out talking about the theory of how do you organize your organization to optimize cognitive load. And that's the theory of team topology, which is what Henrik will talk about next.
Yes, and it's team topologies, not team apologies. But if you don't do the first, you might need to do the second. So we tried to, so this is a very quick intro to team topology. I would recommend that you buy the book. The audiobook is great. So at the bottom, you can see we have the platform team in blue, like the troll. So that's a color theme. Yeah, proud moment. This is where you try to reduce the extraneous load, right? You make things easier. Run on a server has nothing to do with solving a bank transfer problem, right? And then you have the complicated subsystem, which is kind of a platform team, but more from an intrinsic perspective, right? So this is where if you have some very complicated part of your domain, you can have a team that creates a service other services can call so that they don't have to focus on that. So it could be how do you do foreign bank transfer, whatever it is. There might be some regulations there, right? Everything needs to be an API here. There are different interaction modes and teams types. So everything until now has been API based. Then we have the enabling team. So you can see those as kind of internal consultants. And I think the future of consultancies, like Høegh, who was here, Sharpen would not no, something, I can't remember. They can come in and help you and upskill, right? And teach you and then move out again. That's actually the function of the enabling team. So they facilitate. They don't chop wood, they sharpen your axis. That's actually what that means. So you could have internals. It's very expensive depending on how often you need them to have them internally, so it might make sense to use externals. But they facilitate, so it's not API driven, but facilitation. Then we have the yellow teams. This is the stream-aligned teams. This is where the domain is maximized. And this is where the wizard, I think his name is Oz or something, I can't remember. So this is where the product teams are. They focus on the domain, they use the intrinsic craftsmanship, and they solve problems, right? And they deliver end to end. And by doing this, this is made with cognitive load in mind. And that's what we really like about this. Yes? So if we move on to the point, if we take the extraneous load, you need to remember you need to reduce that. And you can do that with abstractions, APIs, and all that stuff. Make things easier. And this is where platform engineering is heading, I think, with developer experience, as they call it, or PUCs, as I would call it. And this works really nicely. In bigger companies, it's a no-brainer to invest in because it gives a lot of value for all your teams. And then the next thing is the intrinsic load. You need to simplify it. Again, some abstractions maybe, but it's also about upskilling, being better at stuff. The more you train something, the easier it is also. Onboarding, all that stuff needs to be smooth and just work, right? There's something about fast and slow thinking. If you train something, you can move it from the slow to the fast thinking. I'm really good at slow thinking. I've been told that my entire life. Yes. Maybe they didn't mean that, but yeah. And then we have the domain load, and this is the domain. This is what we want to maximize. So those are the 3 keywords with cognitive load, right? We want as much HP or working memory left when we get to the domain. We don't want to hear people go, "Oh, I'm tired." Right? So we want to do that. And and if we go back to the beginning, developer experience is not platform engineering. This is just one of the 3 pillars. And of that one pillar, developer experience equals platform engineering is just one of these, right? So we believe developer experience is much, much more than just platform engineering. I hope we convinced you, so we don't need to correct so many people on LinkedIn. So it'll save us a lot of time. Yes, and if you are on LinkedIn, so are we. You might have noticed. And we would love if you connect and let us know what you think and how you deal with these cognitive loads and what you think about the talk as well. And with that, we would love to say thank you.
Yeah, and we actually have 7 minutes for questions, if there are any.
I'm on. Let's give them a big round of applause first and then take some questions. I saw one up here.
Thank you for the talk, first of all, very interesting. I have a question because you both have mentioned internal tools that you have developed to make your developers' life easier. In one case for extraneous load, in the other one for intrinsic. And then you've also mentioned team topologies and how there's a platform team and then an enabling team would do something differently. So the platform team would create a tool and then the enabling team would be the one working with the developer, so to say. What I have seen sometimes is like we also have some internal tools, and of course there's an initial learning curve. And even if you try to make things easy and abstract away the complexity and whatnot, you need to teach people how to use that thing that you have built. How do you deal with that? Is that just the platform team becoming an enabling team for a while? Does that rely mainly on documentation, just on the fact that it's intuitive to use? Or how are you addressing that problem, basically?
Do you want to answer?
I can try.
I mean, I can also.
Yeah, we can give one each, I guess. We're from
Okay, so from our point of view, that's where the user experience really comes up. That's why we call it platform user experience and development user experience. So we have to treat internal tools as external tools in a way that we are producing from our enabling team. We have to sell this, and we have to make it easy to use, easy to adapt. And we need to aim for that. When we onboard new developers, that within the first day, they should be able to, with these tools, deploy something to production first day. That's what we should aim for.
At Velux, the biggest window company in Denmark, what we've done is we hired a platform advocate from our perspective, Emma, who's here. And she created a developer learning portal where we have blog posts and videos, tutorials on how to use Bora and so on. We also do surveys, so we try to probe our developers, like how are you feeling, how are you, what's in your way, and to get some feedback on how we can improve not just the platform, but also the developer ecosystem in Velox. So we try to be more data-driven on how we can make things easier and better and more efficient and effective, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
More questions? Oh, there's a question here.
Thank you. How do you deal with users coming to you saying, I wish I could use this open source tool instead of this internal tool?
Yes. So I actually had a question once where I did, I think, a fireside chat in Copenhagen, where someone asked, what if someone wants to use another English controller, a developer? And I'm like, why the heck would a developer think about English controllers? Then we failed, right? The problem I see today is that people build these huge toolboxes with Kubernetes, all these tools, and then they automate it and give it to developers and say, yeah, good luck with that. I don't think that's okay. And in that world, they would care. They would think about, maybe this would solve my problem because I just saw a video where it seemed like it solved what I needed, the 5%. When you do platform engineering, you can cater for the 80%. But you need to also enable people to opt out for the 20%. So you want a golden path, not a golden cage, right? So.
And from my perspective, I have set up 3 new development teams last year, and they never ask for a certain tool. When you go for app development job, what you want is to solve problem for the end user, delivering business value. That's also usually where they find interesting. And if they like playing with tools, they probably will not go for that job in the first place. So we have not experienced that so far. And if we do, we will probably have a talk why they think it's interesting. And we're also aiming for having an inner sourcing model for internal tool, so they can actually contribute if they really feel passionate about that. Yeah.
All right. We have time for one more question. Oh, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Up here.
So we've been talking about platform engineering, and I've been wondering myself, our organizations, well, where we draw the line of responsibility. We're talking, for example, like CLI tools to create the new project from template. It mentions dependency management. Whose responsibility to maintain those dependencies? Who takes responsibility when these dependencies getting outdated, and in similar cases, infrastructure, databases, and so on?
Yeah.
So I think that was my slide, and the example with vulnerability management comes from more the third-party software dependencies. And that is the part that's maintained in the service template. And that is the one place we need to, from centrally, change the dependencies and upgrade them. And then all the domain team who adapts that just need to upgrade their template artifact. And we do not worry about infrastructure vulnerabilities because that's managed by the platform team. And that's the extraneous load, as you can all see.
So in our case, we try to build platforms like a security platform, for instance, that scans and creates SBOMs and gives feedback early on. So in the pipeline, they will get feedback if there is a critical CV that is fixable. You can also run it on your laptop, the same command, borrow, run, scan container, or your mother's laptop, or wherever you want to do it. And that's the good, I mean, we use Sysdig behind the scenes, but the developers don't really need to know. They just need the right feedback. And that's I think, the important part. That's the communication, right? So they need to know, am I good or not? You know, and we shorten the feedback loop by enabling them to do it on their laptop. Everything you can do in CI, you can do on your laptop. That's the idea, or what we are trying to promise them, to encourage really, really fast feedback. Yeah. And Sysdig is actually quite good, I think. Yes.
Okay, quick follow-up.
Yes.
So say there is a hypothetical situation. You as a platform engineering team saying we need to update these dependencies. There is a serious vulnerability. Another side, there is engineering manager in product team saying we don't have time to update dependencies. We have to push for this feature tomorrow.
Yeah.
How do you solve that?
So this is all about how risk hungry you are, right? So this is where you would need to have maybe someone who understands security to talk to the business people who understands the domain, right? And they need to agree on how and what. In our case, you cannot get to production if you have a critical that is fixable. You can then get an exemption, or we can let it through for a period of time, but you need to say why that is. And we're actually trying now to ramp up, keep being better at giving more feedback on maybe we shouldn't do this. This Log4j, I heard something about it, maybe not. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you so
right,
much.
we are unfortunately out of time.